It's hard to argue that there is much that is more important than education to the development and ultimately the well-being of a community. However, according to a June 2022 Gallup poll, K through 12 teachers have the highest burnout rate of any U.S. profession. We'll talk with an education professional about mental and emotional health in the K through 12 system up next on this episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast.
From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. As workplace mental health has become a global priority, there's a greater focus on addressing psychosocial hazards. Each episode, we look at psychological safety from an occupational health and safety perspective. Let's talk Psych Health and Safety.
Welcome to this week's Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. I'm your host, Dr. I. David Daniels, and I want to thank you for tuning in. Each week, we seek to increase awareness of the importance of psychological health and safety by learning from the lived experiences, research, and expertise of our guests, and advocating strategies to reduce harm and minimize vulnerability to psychosocial hazards in the American workplace. One of the most important things that any community does is educate the children in that community. It's a discussion that's been had for literally thousands of years. How do we prepare the next generation to be able to take over for the folks who are in charge of whatever, whether that be businesses, whether that be government? But the responsibility of being in the education system, teaching, administering, whatever it is that folks do in the K through 12 system is often really complicated. There's a lot going on, a lot of expectations from the community at large, from parents, from students, from other districts, from other governments, just a lot going on. And a lot of that has an impact on the folks who are in the system itself. And exposure to psychosocial hazards based on all kinds of interactions with other people, with the latest curriculum change, with the latest state test. Those are challenges that folks in the K through 12 system have to deal with all the time. So in this episode, we're going to have a conversation about what that's like. Like many who are either watching or listening, we've all been in or around the system once or twice, but it's always interesting to have voices from inside who actually kind of know what's going on. And in this case, someone who gets, because of the position, to be able to see even the big picture around K through 12 education. So I rather than going through long resumes and histories of what folks have done, I've got this kind of patented way to bring folks into the podcast. And we're going to do that this time as well by getting an introduction from our guest, by our guest, with this question. Who is Dawnnesha Lasuncet?
Oh, I love that question. Because I ask myself that like weekly, right? And it's so funny because someone said to me last week that I was a complicated individual, right? I'll take it. So who is Dawnnesha Lasuncet? Well, I am the daughter of two parents who were part of the Great Migration from Louisiana and Mississippi, who really instilled in my brothers and I just the importance of, education and remembering who you belong to, right? So that's who I am first. I'm a former classroom teacher, so I've been in PK through higher ed education probably since I was 15 years old, but technically, licensed since 1997, so a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I am a literacy advocate, and just really, really believe that everyone deserves all of the information, right? So we could just be the best that we can be, best citizens of the world that we can be. I'm a mom to two children, a wife to an educator as well, an 8th grade teacher. And so we just have a really hearty and robust way that we just kind of look at things when it comes to education education, being educated, what it means to be liberated, what it means to be free, right, through education. Um, yeah, I also am a roller skater and a jump roper, and I really love the fun.
Yay, roller
Yeah.
skater. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah, that's a skill I was never really all that good at. So I'm amazed by folks who can actually. So you actively roller skate now? Lots.
Yes, but just like recreationally though, like at the
Okay.
rink. Not, and I don't do tricks, and I can't do a lot of spinny things. Um, but
Right.
yes, yeah,
Wow.
and I love to roller skate. It's
Yay.
a relaxing and a wonderful freeing activity, you know.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
Well, so another pretty consistent question for all my guests. And again, I'm not looking for a textbook type of answer. I rarely am. But what does psychological health and safety, when you hear that, what does that mean to you?
I think you're not looking for a textbook answer. I do believe it does lend itself to the freedom to be vulnerable, to have um, my way of thinking and the way that I think, and be able to say that, and have dissension and opinions, and the vulnerability that you know is needed to make change, and and to be able to like have people not like shun me later, or feel differently about me later, uh, to make me feel like I'm a part of community, and I'm a part of something bigger, that I can make a difference, and make a change. I also think that psychological safety and health means that the conditions around me um, give me the ability to heal, give me the ability to be taken care of and to take care of myself. Um, that I'm getting the correct information, and that I'm able to, make judgments about the information that I'm getting. You know,
Mhm.
um, I also think like clarity about my positioning, and where I sit, and the role that I play in any situation, right? Whether or not I feel like I belong somewhere. All of those things really, make a difference in terms of like whether I feel psychologically safe and healthy and whole in an environment.
Yeah, that's yeah, we're going to delve a little bit into the to some of the things that you said. So so you did mention that you've been a licensed educator, if you will, since the 90s. Can you talk about the role that you have now? What is it that you do in education now?
Yeah. So the '90s. When you put it like that, oh my goodness. Like you might as well just say the 1900s,
No, no.
right? But I've also been an adult. I'm an adult educator now, um, and my role has changed from classroom teacher to adult educator in the way of coaching and consulting with teachers and educational leadership.
Mm,
I did that for a while with our state government, and now I work for a governmental educational institution where I'm the equity and inclusion coordinator.
okay.
So when you're asking me about psychological safety and health, I'm kind of speaking through lived experience, just the body that I'm in, the gender that I'm in, but also like what that means when we're talking about policy and practices um, that affect people's lives and workplace culture in general. So to be an equity and inclusion coordinator at a huge agency, that I'm responsible for helping to cultivate the climate and culture, right? But also really paying attention to when ineffective policies and practices, right, become barriers to people
Mm,
um, having a safe and healthy workplace, right? And feeling like even when the work is hard, um, that we have some systems in place and some supports in place that really make sure that people can be their full selves at work, or at least experience healthy conditions. right? So I do that right now for our agency, and then the way that our agency is comprised is we have a service model. So we work with 10 districts in our region that also seek a myriad of services that we offer. And so for me personally, it means um, assisting our human resources director, but also giving coaching and consulting support for districts who are also trying to cultivate healthy workplace and psychologically safe environments for their educators and their staff, right? And parents and kids too.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
that's a lot. And do it in so there's the overall agency that provides services to other districts. Do you are there other people who do what you do around that you
Mm.
interact with, or is it kind of all on you all the time?
That's a great question. The you know what, this answer changes yearly. It feels like,
Sure.
right? Because so one is the answer is yes. There are definitely folks who are doing what I do. The titles are different. The
Sure.
scope of work is different. Even where they're housed is different. Sometimes in education, um, we tend to have equity work reside in curriculum and instruction or teaching and learning. And there's the appropriateness of that and what that means. Corporate structures, typically this resides in a human resources or a standalone office, right, where there's a team of people. Um, so it just really depends on the agency, the district, and what the scope of work is. Um, the piece, though, around what you asked about support is that regionally there are lots of different diversity, equity, inclusion networks, um, equity leaders, across the state or the region for me to be able to participate in. And even though there's role alike connections there and affinity in that way, the scope of work is really very different depending on what the position is designed to do. So for me, I do have regionally two colleagues that I regularly, collaborate with or talk to. But because our agencies are so different, even though we are education service district, because of that, our service models are so different. Uh, Sometimes we hit a wall in terms of uh, cross collaboration or. But one of the things that is the same across the board is that everyone is deeply concerned about workforce retention, health of workforce, um, and what does this mean for education when it feels like it's a salient issue right now, right? And I think that might even be nationally, equity and inclusion positions or whatever aside. Like I think it's like an ongoing thing that we're all very concerned about right now is our education workforce, the health of folks, of us.
Right, right, and when you talk about the health of these folks, I assume that you're talking about both, how they feel emotionally and physically as well. I mean,
Yeah.
there is I think the data will back up that the two industries that experience the highest number of workplace violence incidents tend to be education and healthcare.
Mm, yeah.
Uh, and when people hear that, it sounds like, and we're not talking about the ones that you see on the news. We're talking about things that people wouldn't, being, you know, verbally assaulted by someone because they disagree with, what's being taught, or a student that's having some, either physical or emotional or something going on with them, or conflict among. It is a very it's kind of fraught with, and it's a part of the job. To be quite honest, it is. At least
Right.
I think it would be difficult to remove it from the job because folks have their opinions about how education is supposed to work, and as a service of the government, people feel like even more that it ought to work this way and it should be this way. So talk a little bit about at least some of the things that you've observed relative to some of the mental and emotional challenges of being in K through 12 education.
Oh my goodness. I want to be careful, just simply because I'm not directly in the classroom anymore. I haven't been in the classroom for almost 10 years, which is I'm a relic at this point, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
However, because I work so closely with teachers and our programs in our agency, and also because my husband is a classroom teacher, I'm in schools. So I think I can. I feel like I'm glad you asked me the question. I think I can still speak on it. But however, what I do know to be certain is the answer that I could give you in 2019 is very different than the answer that I'm giving you in 2023, right? Because it's the yes and that everything that you talked about has always been an issue or a concern for educators. However, COVID did a number on us, globally, for sure, and nationally. It's done a number on us, and you know this, right? And we had a lot of, in addition to avoiding getting sick, which was a psychosocial hazard, right? Because you're actively trying to avoid getting sick. What that means for us to have been in that isolation and away from people, and then just trying not to get sick. And then, dealing with everything from death to long-term disability issues to, and then we had, in the midst of that, George Floyd and what that meant around like a racial reckoning and reawakening, and then to see the fruits of, some of those movements that happened out of there kind of, be squashed or squandered, right? And then we have, learning loss and, in quotes, and, what that meant, and the socio-political nature of like, contentious elections and, things happening nationally, right? It's been a heck of a 3 years. And so for me, it feels like we haven't healed that trauma collectively and addressed it really. And we've just been resilient or pushed through or hoped for that it was 2019 again. And so because of that, I think that adults, our emotional intelligence has been challenged in this. And kids have been watching this the entire time. And, there's an additional piece to this, which is, the uptick in, so I believe in everyone having all of the information. And I think the uptick of the information rabbit hole, right? So everyone has a podcast, everyone has a YouTube, everyone has a live, everyone has a TikTok. And I can say what I believe and what I feel, and and we can continue to talk about it. And depending on my bias and what's confirmed, I can access that information anytime and make meaning from it, right? And now we're all in a relation with each other, and kids are accessing information that adults don't even know that they're accessing. And so all of that is coming into play, and we're still in community with one another. And school spaces that were designed to, really are community spaces. And so everyone is, I can imagine that while we're still trying to get back to the business of, state standards and being prepared and trying to play catch up over the last 3 years, that there's also just some things that we're not addressing or really prepared for when it comes to the safety and mental health challenges that everyone is bringing, right? And so it concerns me because I've been wondering over the past maybe year and a half now around when do we slow down and really address that, right? Um, much of what I believe about being a culturally responsive educator is that we have to be in tune with youth culture because youth culture shows up in our building first, right? Right? Like students are coming into our buildings as 13-year-olds who pay attention to what 13-year-olds pay attention to. And as an educator, if I'm not in tune to what's happening with them, right? What they're paying attention to, what they have access to, what concerns them now, what fears that they've developed, right, over these past few years that we've all been in tumult, then I'm at a disadvantage, right? And I can imagine that it probably feels, what's the word I'm looking for? Like how do we get a handle on it, right? When it feels like everything has just been rushed and speedy, and we just all jumped right back into being back, right?
Right, right. Yeah, while and I can't say I really considered, the whole thing about youth culture, but the K through 12 system is in many ways the sometimes almost a canary in the coal mine because it starts things that start in schools are going to end up in business. They're going to end up in government. They're going to end up at the civic, discourse in a few years. I mean, most of us, there was a theory out there. You are now who you were when. Basically, whatever was going on in your life when you were somewhere between 8 and 13 is really who you're going to be for the rest of your life, unless there's some significant emotional thing that knocks you off of that path. You're going to be that person. Again, some things may change, but you're really being formed. And so the things that you're seeing, these fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth grade kind of kids, that they're starting to see the world and understand the world and the reactions that they're having to it, they're going to be working with someone in a business or in an organization less than a decade from now. And a lot of that stuff's going to, it's going to follow with them. And to your point, if you're not aware of what's going on, you're kind of, it's really difficult to do the job the way it should be done because you have no idea what you're dealing with. That's just an interesting observation on your part.
I mean, and also, and youth really age, right? As you were talking about that, it occurred to me too that the beautiful part about this, though, is that because youth have access to information very quickly that we don't have, right? Is that they're taking care of one another and coming up with solutions themselves, right? And actually helping to inform us as the adults in the space around how to address the problems, right, that are occurring. And not to say that they are, they can't be solely responsible for their own safety. Like that's not how that should work. But I do think that part of addressing something like a psychosocial hazard around, just the environment that kids go to every single day and whether or not that's safe for them or not. We have to be able to be willing to flex and hear their voices. Because, we just encountered a time that none of us has ever experienced across generations, right? My 92-year-old grandmother had not experienced that before, right? So, I don't think that anyone was the expert in that.
Right.
And so it would behoove us to work collaboratively with youth who actually, like you said, were forming and watching and taking in information and watching all of us, right, have a little bit of discord and disagreement in the way that we solved problems or didn't during that time, right, to ensure that we're meeting the psychological safety needs of each other. Another thing that I didn't have to necessarily, I was in my second year of teaching when Columbine happened,
Mm.
So I remember it very, very vividly, those staff meetings and what that meant. I do remember at the time though, was like, we're in Los Angeles and that's over there. We should be aware, but that's like that's over there. We don't live in 1998, 99 anymore. Like,
Right.
right? And so, you know, knowing that we're in this time where students now have to deal with active shooter drills, and and teachers have to to prop a door or not, to open a window or not. Like, that's just another element of physical safety, but it's a psychological safety issue,
Right.
right? That a generation of teachers, or teachers who've been veteran teachers, now have to consider, in addition to, right, state standards and getting ready for all of these things. And so I just, my hope is that at the building level, we're having regular conversations that are holistic, right? So not just meeting the mandates of whatever it is, but also checking in and making sure that we're addressing the concerns that people are coming into the building with, but also honoring what parents are saying, and which also those conversations have been contentious, but I think that but they don't have to be, and I think that there are lots of pockets, more often than not, where they aren't, right?
Mm. Mm. Yeah, that's kind of where I was thinking about going next, because so I've heard, and you probably have heard the same thing, that the customer's always right. And I don't necessarily believe that. They're not always right. And so when we're talking about education, sometimes you have to question, who is the customer? And often, and it was really interesting to hear what you were saying about paying attention to how the students feel, how they're feeling, what's actually going on with them, because uh, particularly during the school year, the educators are spending more time with children than their parents are. I mean, they are a lot more time, and they're actually seeing some things sometimes that the parents may not see. And so it's important to be able to hear, again, the students' voices, see their behavior, what's going on with them, and kind of string that together to try, how do you create an environment that helps them feel safe? But on the other hand, there are other parents who remind folks in the public sector, no matter what part of the sector, I am the taxpayer and I have ideas about this and that, even though they have no idea, they're not really educators or anything, but they're mechanics or, pilots or whatever they do, which they do a great job at, but they don't necessarily know how this system should work. So talk about a little bit about those interactions and how it's not. I think it's probably a balancing act. They all have to be kind of balanced because parents do have some kind of expectations, but even the parents think different things. One group says you have to teach this, and the other group says you have to teach that. One says you have to be here, and the other says you have to be there, and you're in the middle. So talk a little bit about those interactions with the parents, and even some of the parents are having their own challenges.
Yeah. I'm just gonna. I guess I'll answer that question speaking as a parent. But also, I think our discourse over the last few years, I would say 10 years, right, give or take a few years, has been super polarizing, and we're starting to put parents and students and citizens into two categories, right? Right? And or basing our assumptions on what snippets or what we see, and those things are actually true. And I think that just much like human beings, there's lots of ooey gooey gray, right? And at the end of the day, right, I think all of us just care about our children,
right?
I do think that we need to do a better job of caring for everyone's children, right, and looking at, right, and caring about our children's peers, right? However, I do think that everyone does care about their children. The way that we move about that may be different, and so I think I always have to ask myself, as an educator and as someone who only speaks education ease at this point. You know what I mean? Like, I know all the words and the acronyms. Like, but when does that a barrier? When is that a barrier to me really hearing what the concern is of a family, right? Or when is it that a family comes with there's the expertise of their child, the expertise of their family dynamic, the expertise around what they want for their child. And they might not say it or deliver it in the way that I would want them to, or like we would expect them to. Or, we're reading what they're saying as we're filtering it through our own biases, or we're filtering it through our own information about what we have. We're not really listening to what the deep concern is, and what the common denominator is between the two of us about what is best for the student, right? And so I think because everyone's accessing different information, people usually are going to go and get the information that they want, that they need, because we're not providing them with the information to begin with. So if you're not giving me what I need, or it doesn't sound like it will help or be beneficial to me, then I'm going to go somewhere else to be able to get it. And someone will be speaking my language, right, or saying it the way that I want them to say it, or give me the service or resource that I need. And so I think now is a really good time. I feel like during the COVID environment and COVID plus environment, it was an ideal time for us to really change the way that we have the partnership, or have created the partnership over the years between community, parents, and schools, and really think about a new, innovative way to work together to move student achievement, but also to make sure that the health and well-being of students is being met, right? Because one thing that COVID did teach us is that, none of us, like I said, none of us had the answer, and all of us were trying to figure out a way to stay healthy. Right. So I think that once that step alone around kind of checking ourselves a little bit about what is a parent really saying. I think we also can get really caught up in the camps of, you don't care about kids, I care about kids thing. Which, for me, I feel like, yes, and I think we need to figure out what we truly care about, right? Because we care about something.
Right. Right. Yeah.
We care about something. I also do think that just communicate. Communication between the school building itself and parents and community was thwarted because of distance learning and remote and virtual learning. And so what does that mean to kind of reestablish like patterns of behavior and ways that we communicate with each other, and how do we socialize again, like parents and community, like, and ingratiate ourselves into opening ourselves up as community-based centers rather than, this is the place where you drop it. Like, I wonder around as we move into 2023 and beyond, like how we hearken into new ideas and ways to, have schools in community rather than trying to reach back to the 2019 before. I just always think about that, and I'm just always curious about it, because I don't know if it served us, if it was serving us well to begin with.
Right.
I know it wasn't. Right. But I think it's because we're programmed and socialized to just go back to the way that things were. But it's at a cost, right?
Hi listeners, Jason here. We hope you're enjoying this latest podcast episode. Now, if you're like Joelle, Alicia and myself and enjoy learning from the best, then the Flourish DX Academy is for you. The Academy includes free e-learning courses on the ISO 45003 standard for psychological health and safety at work, and associated topics such as how to conduct a psychosocial risk assessment and how to create the business case for psych health and safety. All courses feature high-quality videos, downloadable resources, multi-choice questions, and a downloadable training certificate on completion. Take your learning to the next level with all Flourish DX Academy courses included within the Flourish DX mobile app. Select podcast episodes from the Psych Health and Safety podcast and sister podcasts from Canada and the USA are also included. Get started with Flourish DX for free at www.flourishdx.com/get-started. That's www.flourishdx.com/get-started. Now back to this episode.
Yeah, my view of the pandemic, and I've shared this probably more times than maybe I even should, but it is my belief. The pandemic didn't change as much as people say it changed. It just exposed a bunch of stuff that was already there.
Yeah.
It really did. And it accelerated it. So, as I said, businesses that failed, many of them were businesses that were on the margins anyway, and that just tipped them over the edge. Many of the folks who got seriously ill and some who even passed away, they were already had, physical kinds of things are already challenged, and this pushed it over the edge. So it just really accelerated things that were our healthcare system is already stressed and already has some challenges when we get too many people showing up at a hospital. Many of the systems in our, many of our school buildings don't have the technology that they need to do things in 2023. That none of that, the pandemic didn't make it that way. It just highlighted it and put it in people's faces. So share a little bit, as we're, in whatever phase we're in. I don't know.
I call it COVID plus at this point.
Okay.
That's just what I call it.
So what, and I think you've hinted of what gives you hope and optimism that this is, that in the education system, it's getting better. I mean, do you see some signs that, people are paying more attention to how, particularly the emotional and mental needs of staff? And I think it's always been some concern about the kids, but, is there more conversation about, teachers and, staff and, custodians and people who are the environment that the kids are in? Do you see that getting better in the future or even now?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think it's very uncomfortable now though. So it could feel to someone that when are we going to take action? I think that action's been taken, and I think that we're just living in kind of this discomfort, because things were shaken up, and people are not wanting to, are acknowledging what you said, which is things were unearthed, and now we can't look away or turn back.
Right.
We have to address it. I think one of the things that we were really cognizant of at our agency prior to COVID, maybe the week before COVID, because I actually only spent a week I just started the position and I was there for like a week, and then we got sent home, and so I was figuring out this position from my bed. But one of the things that we learned really quickly was, how do we use wellness as an equity strategy at our agency, right? So if the goal was to create a healthy workplace culture where every student and staff member could thrive, right? Then what did that actually mean, and who did we need to be paying attention to? And so, we had to pay attention to, folks who are racially and linguistically and culturally diverse, folks who are neurodivergent, right? Folks who are experiencing disability, right? Like a myriad of ways that people's identities are very salient and show up in the workplace, but also could be experiencing psychosocial hazards as a result, right, of those identities. for sure. And so what does that mean for folks? What does that mean for lifespan of folks? If already you've got workplace stressors and occupational stress, the design of the work is not quite what you thought it would be. You have role unclarity, right? Maybe your role changes every day, right? Maybe you're supposed to pivot. You're not a team player if you don't, right? And on top of that, like, so everyone's experiencing that. And then on top of that, right, you're also experiencing microaggressions, right? You're experiencing pay inequity, like a lot of things. So one of the things that we really wanted to pay attention to was then what does that have to do with our wellness efforts and our agency? And I think collectively throughout the industry, well, cross industries now, I don't think that people would necessarily say that they're calling it that, but I think that those things have been really salient issues that have come up in the COVID plus environment, right? Around, like, these are some traditional cultural workplace norms that we cannot continue to uphold, right, as values or behaviors anymore, because they're at a detriment to the health and the safety of our workforce. And if we want to recruit, new folks, including educators, right, there's movement to create, for racially, culturally, and diverse educators. Well, then what does that mean when, if we recruit them and we promise them, all of these things, and then they get here and we don't have the support that we need for them,
Right.
or we don't value the skill set that we hired them for, right? Or we don't set them up for the systems of supports and mentorships that we have. And so I think at our agency, we've really been wrestling and grappling with what that means, and I think our districts have as well, around we can't go back to the old status quo or those social norms that we used to have, because, things have changed. People's relationship to and mindsets about work have also changed too. And so we have to be mindful around, honoring the boundaries that people put up for themselves, as well around what meaningful and purposeful and healthy work looks like.
Yeah, wow. Wellness as an equity strategy. That's an interesting conversation. It is. Yeah, it's hard to feel equity when you're feeling pain and pressure.
That's right.
I mean, because you look at, because often if I'm feeling, threatened in some way, not feeling my best, I at least the way it works for me is I'm trying to find the source of that thing so I can stop it because I don't like it.
That's right.
And often we'll kind of default to, if it's coming from some other source, that I wonder, are they treating everybody else like that? What does it look like why is it that way for me all the time? That whole thing.
Yeah.
So, but in a well environment, when people are feeling good physically, emotionally, and things are well and settled, you don't hear a lot of concerns about equity and equality and all this other kind of stuff because things are going good. I mean, it's amazing way to think about it.
Yeah. And a part of that too is, I think the kids too, right? Like even younger kids who have the language and know, like, if I'm feeling pain or this doesn't look, or they're feeling, look, like, hey, that's happening. You know what I mean? And
Right.
So I think the adults in the environment, like spaces in the work environment now are saying and have been saying, right, for years. But I think we're in a time now where folks are very quick to say, like, hey, no, this doesn't work. Right. And this isn't working for us. And I'm not quite sure what system you need to put in place or who you need to call. But,
this
yeah. And I also do. I just know that when I talk about workforce retention, it's a real concern. We have teacher prep programs at the graduate level who are not retaining or enrolling students. Right. So, and as a result, we don't have a large pool of potential educators to choose from on a national level. Right. And so even us trying to figure out, why aren't people attracted to our work, and what do we need to do to to mitigate that. Look at that.
Right.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's like the ongoing question that we have for
Right.
sure.
Right. Yeah. It's just a challenge if if you sit there and kind of peel the layers back. It's a real challenge that, as you said earlier, we can't look away from what we found. I mean it's kind of in our face. We won't be able to go back to 2019 or 2010 or 1984. We're not. I mean, as much as people may want to go back, we're not going back there. We're not, because if for no other reason than these kids are smarter than that.
Yeah, that's right.
They are. That's just not going to
Yeah.
work. And this is a conversation I continue because most of my conversations are around the workplace, but workers are smarter than that now too. That information that you used to be able to hide from them, you can't anymore.
Sure.
And so it's important that whoever's in leadership, whoever's in coordination or whatever position of responsibility, you have to have this dialogue with the person you say you're trying to help, even if it's a kid. I mean, we had that discussion in my house about, particularly my youngest son, 7 or 8 years old. We start talking about, so how does this work for you? And if it doesn't work, I'm open for suggestion because, and interestingly, I'm going to have him and my niece and my sister on as guests on a podcast here coming up. But I don't know everything. No matter, just because I'm a parent, I don't even know everything about my kid because I'm not the kid. I'm me, but I'm not them. And a lot of it is about simply asking, how does this work for you? Because people are more, again, to another point that you made, people are, particularly younger folks are getting more accustomed to speaking for themselves. This is how it feels for me. This is how it works for me. And it doesn't make you a bad person because I feel it different. It just says I need something different.
Yeah.
I just need this isn't working. So then the question goes back to us, those of us who have the opportunity to form that system. Do we care enough about that person to try to make it, to cause it to feel safer for them? Or are we just trying to do it like we did?
Yeah.
I walked to school 10 miles uphill both ways, and you got to do it.
No, that's spot on. Spot on. And to be able to be self-aware enough and emotionally intelligent enough to do that, right? Which is like an ongoing. When you asked earlier, who am I? Like that is the work in progress for me. Right. As an educator, I used to be an authoritarian, and even as a parent, a little bit with my first child. And then you grow up a little bit, and people check, pull your coattail a little bit, and then you also see yourself mirrored in your child, and and then on the second one you might try something different. You know what I mean?
Right.
If you, and so I think to your point, what are we committed to and what are we attached to in education?
Right.
Is really the question. And I think the key around the wellness piece, there's a couple of things. So one is you can't have those things without healing, right? And you can't do it without addressing the trauma, the history of things, too, right?
Right.
And then healing that,
right.
And making sure that folks feel whole, and whatever that means, right? And it's only for the person who was traumatized to determine if they are whole or not.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
I learned that from you. And then the other piece, though, that I'm really heartened by at our agency is that, so we've taken, our safety committee, our safety team and our mental health team, our human resources team, and even our aspects of our leadership team, and really tried to de-silo this conversation a little bit, and have been really working collaboratively around the messaging, common messaging, alignment, checking in with one another around when we've talked to districts about their concerns, bringing it back to one another around like how it strengthens our service model, but also applies to our own staff. And so I think, even just over the last year, I've been able to see movement in terms of us kind of looking at this from a holistic point of view, and really delivering that message to folks who, typically just look at safety as, all of the things that, the physical, the bio, the you're right, like those things, right? And it's just been a really nice start to. It's been a really really nice start to the work that tends to be isolating when we're talking about this stuff.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
That could be isolating.
So one final question, and I this might be a little different. So you've talked a little bit about being in this industry for a number of years and working with your agency to help both students and parents and staff and kind of create this this environment where people feel safe. So the last thing I'd like to ask you is, so what are the things that you do and continue to do to create an environment for yourself that's supportive? And you knew I was going to do that, didn't you?
Yeah.
Because one of the psychosocial hazards in the standard is the responsibility to care for others.
Yeah.
That is that responsibility. So a teacher having to care for a student, a parent for a child, an administrator for that is a hazard in and of itself that sometimes folks focus on so much that they find themselves going, the days are getting really long and I haven't taken a vacation recently and all that type of thing. So,
right.
What are some, as we, close out the conversations, what are some things that you're, to stay, to stay engaged in this work that you do? What do you do for you?
Oh, that's a work in progress. I read a quote today from the Winters Group that's led by Mary Frances Winters. And they're a diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice group. And the quote that I read was that diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice won't work in isolation. And I was like, yeah, that's true. The things that I experience in this seat, right, for me, in this seat in education, is that even though I'm a long-term educator, and even though I speak all of the languages and know all of the policies and can do all of that, like I still can be in my own little perch, right? And left to my own devices, if I don't regularly seek collaboration and network. So the way that I take care of myself in the work is, because I'm a deep collaborator, I just make sure that everything I do is teamwork, right? And that I'm infused to somewhere on someone's team, or I'm doing something that's project based, or coaching, or something that doesn't keep me alone for very, very long. Right? It also really helps me just get the neuroplasticity going, the cognition going, and so that's helpful for me at work. At home, it's a little bit tougher. I live in a space in a state that's 2.3% African American, Black, and so if I'm not in deep community intentionally, then it's very difficult. That's just real talk. Mm-hmm. And so what I'm finding that I have to do is I just have to go outside and be around folks. Right? I'm not from the state. My family is not here. My immediate family is here, but like my extended family is not here. My best, friends come and go. And so for me, it really is just making sure that I'm around people, laughing, roller skating, taking walks,
Right.
I'm a voracious reader,
Right.
so I love to, read. But I do know that for me, social isolation is not. I can tell when I'm just not, haven't been in community for a while. And
Mm.
so this is actually one of those times.
Mm.
And so this conversation has reminded me that I probably need to
Right.
reassess my community engagement a little bit, Doc.
Right. Right. Right.
Because
Well.
that's the ultimate self care. I mean,
Right.
other than, going to, the gym and,
Right.
making sure
Right.
that I know who
Yeah.
I am,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But being in
Absolutely.
deep community with people who just are happy,
Right.
um,
Right.
and
Right.
trying to find peace of mind together is something that
Right.
I need to be accessing a lot more.
Well, good. Good. I'm glad that's helpful. It's a two-part thing. The one is honestly, try to, you know, get you thinking about it. The other is to share that you obviously you're not alone in that perspective. There are a lot of people that are in organizations, roles, jobs, whatever you want to call it, that can feel isolating because they're the specialist on that thing, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you find ways to be able to collaborate with other people that you feel some kinship to, that you have some similarity with, that you feel supported by, that you can laugh with, that you can, and all that stuff's so important because so we don't get into these, oh my God, work, 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 work. I don't believe that we were created to work. I just don't. I think it's necessary. But we
Sure.
weren't created. Our sole purpose was to work, work, and be stressed out by it. I just don't believe it. And but I think it takes work not to fall into it. And and ultimately back to the conversation that we really start off. I think you create a psychologically healthy and safe environment by sometimes stepping out of the environment itself because the environment's tough. It
No,
is.
sure.
It
Yeah.
yeah.
I envy educators
Mm.
um who are in like a band,
Oh,
or like you see them out and it's like, they're on this, they do a team or they run like I envy because education is deeply personal,
yes.
right? Like it can be deeply personal work, all consuming. And I just love an educator who can find that balance around like, I'm a human being too, and I like this too.
Right. Absolutely.
you know?
Absolutely.
And so,
Absolutely.
yeah. And so you're right. You just raised that notion that sometimes I do need to step away from the personalization of the work,
Yes.
right? And just remember who I am and
Yes.
what it is,
Yes.
right? And
You
what
remember we
fuels
started out
me.
with a question. Who is
That's
Dawnnesha?
right.
So we're all the way back to that one again.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
again, so
You.
again, thanks very much for taking time to have some conversation with me today. I want to share with those who are watching this episode on the Flourish DX YouTube page. Please do like, subscribe, share it with your friends, particularly if you know somebody who's involved in education. There's this lady on there talking about education. You need to hear it. If you're watching or listening to the podcast for the first time, welcome. I hope that something you've heard will bring you back to an episode in the future. Previous episodes of the podcast can be found at psychealthandsafetyusa.com. Please do become a part of the Psych Health and Safety USA movement by connecting to us on LinkedIn. And that's it. We will certainly look to hear. This is a kind of a one-way conversation, but hopefully you will join us on a future episode. And I want to drop something else just before I go. Is if you have thoughts or ideas about the podcast, have questions that you would like to share, please do, particularly on LinkedIn, you can share some of those questions with us. You can, we're happy to, as a matter of fact, but maybe someday we'll do a mailbag of some of the questions that folks have to ask, and we can certainly answer them. So again, thanks very much. And hopefully you'll join us next time for the next episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. Thanks very much.
Tune in each Friday for new episodes of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. If you have a story or know of one that needs to be told, reach out to us on LinkedIn or send an email to david@id2-solutions.com or go to the Flourish DX website at flourishdx.com. We'll see you next time.